Gentlemen, welcome to the podcast.
Thank you.
Thanks for having us.
So let's begin with some introductions. This is a lovely full recording studio here in digital space. Danielle, could you introduce yourself and then kick it over to the squad over in Florida?
My name is Daniel Dalla Polla, and I'm well known for tropical cocktails, exotic drink all around the world. That's what I do. Traveling all around, spread the love of rum and exotic drinks. And also, I was a founder of Kauna Room and Exotico in Miami previously. And of course, with my son and my two brothers there, we start the Reef Rum supply adventure. Here we are.
Excellent. Billy.
Hi, I'm Billy. I take care of the Carmer room down in Miami. We are a small speakeasy style tiki bar, or speaky tiki, if you will, and large collection of rums. And that's pretty much our home base where you can come and try and taste and experiment with the Reef Rum supply and anything that we have on stock. And in hand, that's the place where you can you have it firsthand before it reaches the masses, if you will.
All right.
I spend my nights there in that room. Yeah.
Great. How did Nick and Eddie enter the picture here?
That was
Good question. How did you meet Danny?
Danny, I met Danny at Exotico at the very beginning. He used to have rum dinners, which would feature a large brand rum. Very awesome, start to finish, cocktails, delicious food, conversation, learning, and we became really good friends through that. And that's how I met Billy also.
I similarly met Billy and Danny through the bar, through Exotico and then Kona Room. And Danny actually introduced Eddie and I at a farewell party for a friend, and I believe his words were, Nick meet Eddie, Eddie meet Nick. You guys are both rum fascinated, sea dwelling, rock and rollers, and you need to know each other. And,
I think me and Nick, we met in the elevator. we live 3 years in the same building. me, Billy, and Nick, we live in the building of Exotico actually, and I still live there. And for 3 years, so we see each other every day almost. But beside the bar, we become friends.
So you've got the shared proximity, but it also seems like the ocean is an important aspect of not only how you guys, spend time together, but the project that you're working on right now. I see some pictures on the blog of spearfishing. So how did you guys get sort of connect, how did you bond over the shared love of the water, and how did maybe that lead to what we're going to talk about with the Reef Rum supply?
I think that might have started when I began bringing in my tiny little barrels, 1 liter barrels of rum that I was aging underwater on the reef.
Okay.
That's when we started talking about going out on the ocean, going to the beach, and this process, and it kind of evolved from there. But yeah, I'm a diver. I free dive as well as scuba, but free dive for the most part, spearfishing, lobstering, and that's a part of my regular routine. And I think that's kind of how this came about. Without jumping too far ahead here, I was out on the reef and thinking, what if there were some hidden treasure down here instead of just lobsters under these ledges and in these rock holes? What if I found a barrel of rum here, just some fantasy type of pirate idea? And I started thinking about it and looking at stuff that existed or didn't exist, and thought I'd give it a shot. And anyway, I think that's where the conversation kind of started.
Eddie, I think that was the Negroni week coming up. I think it was a Negroni week coming up, and then we still have a Negroni machine, which is a aeroplane card that are like vintage aeroplane card that we put an iPad on top, and below there are connected 8 tubes where you just reorganize the cocktail in the app, and then you just press the button and Negronis come out ready to serve. And that was one of the things we were doing. I think Eddie come out, I don't remember exactly how was the moment, but we need something, a special Negroni. We always do Negroni with rum, And then we start with cachaça many years ago. And then we switched to agricole. And then Eddie is big fans of tea punch. So it was easy. It was a easy, it was a goal right there. Say, okay, let's do this, and then Billy come up with the name. So and it was like, and then me and Nick, we were already working on can cocktail project at that time. So it was like a lot of things going on, and then that's it. And then basically, I think it was the Negroni week when we decided to do the first cocktail, actually, the Seagroni. That's when Negroni week, about 4 years ago, probably.
Yeah, I'll never forget the moment, honestly, because I was bringing you rums that may have been a little bit too salty, and then some that were just right. There was this Goldilocks mix,
and you
said, and you pulled me aside, and you said, "I want to barrel a cocktail underwater," and I thought that was the most insane idea to put a whole cocktail. I'm thinking about like, well, how's this going to work? Juices, sugar, all this stuff is. It's going to sit there under. This isn't going to work, and you're like, no, it's going to be a high proof cocktail, and you already had the vision for it. It was going to be a rum Negroni.
And actually come out. We were so excited, and then I still have the first one in my fridge. I still have it. I'm gonna grab it. I still have it here with in the jar. Billy wrote on top on the paper tape. I still have it.
I love it. So it's all starting to come together now. We've got the freediver who's daydreaming of sunken treasure. We've got the sort of you might call it the kind of in engineering side of things with this vintage airplane cart with the iPad stuck to it that's putting out these sort of ready to go Negronis. We also have the R&D process of this, which is kind of where I'd like to go next. So you mentioned that some of these early projects, I believe, Eddie, you were doing some experiments, and you just mentioned that maybe some were too salty. Maybe you had this process that you were trying to dial in. What did that look like on the palate? So like, how did you said you had already been like sinking some barrels? What does that mean? Were you just sinking them? I see that some of the barrels are in bags on your blog. What are some of the variables that you were tweaking to try and get closer to what eventually became the Seagroni?
Well, it was very much a learning process. The barrels don't breathe like they do on land. And one thing that we can do here that's unique is we can do tropical aging with the temperature range that we have here. This isn't your Kentucky rick house. This isn't, these aren't the docks in London. We've got heat. We've got temperatures similar to the Caribbean. So we can do that sort of thing here, but it's breathing, right? The barrel's breathing. And in this case, we're suffocating the barrel. It's going underwater. There is no interaction with air. It's been cured. So it's watertight. It's been filled. And it's interacting with the ocean in this really unique way. And it's so variable, it's really hard to nail down exactly what's going on with it. But I think the major components are, number one, the pressure. That was really the biggest impetus for me to put this down there, was to use the pressure, the natural pressure gradient down there at 2 atmospheres, so greater than negative 10 meters, which is about 33 feet down, as a constant pressure exposure for the barrels. And there's also the rocking motion of the ocean. So there's tidal currents. We have the Gulf Stream nearby. Sometimes it hits us. It does actually hit Florida about 60 miles north of here, but sometimes it actually comes out to where we are down here. There's also the salinity that comes through a little bit, sometimes more than others. And we figured that out pretty well now, I think, to limit the amount of time that things stay under there so that they don't get to the point where the barrels start leaking and they're intact. But somewhere between the contents, the cured staves that are waterlogged, and the ocean just outside of it is, I believe there's a transport layer between that fluid that's allowing some of it to pass.
These are also like these are learnings we've picked up like over the past 4 years, because part of it really is like that lightning in a bottle of the first Seagroni that came out. Like it hit, it was great. It that was the moment when it went from a question like, hey, let's try this, to like, oh wow, we have something here, right? That like what went in as an agricole rum Negroni came out as this like salted caramel, dark chocolate, like slightly heavier body, kind of like crazy brand new cocktail experience. And we were like, okay, so we drill down on this now, this is something that's like, we really, really want to figure out. And so all of these like subsequent dives, these subsequent barrelings have really been to push towards like repeating that. I mean, we've done that, over and over again now. But to see how the different variances, where we drop it, how long we leave it, if it's 3 weeks, if it's 5 weeks, what time of the season is it, right? The slight change in the ocean temperature and the currents, things like that, as well as the barrels, right? The first filling, second fillings, third fillings, like how those impact the flavors. So we've kind of started with this one like diamond that we found, and then we've started clearing out from around there, and we've begun to like nail down what are some of the core tenets that makes this a repeatable process, makes this a result we can plan for. But then also what are those variances that we introduce or we discover that continue to give us cool, varied results.
And to get real nerdy on this for a second, what I was doing was using a very neutral Blanco, like white rum, Spanish style rum, and because it was from bottle to bottle very consistent and easy to measure the difference in flavor and profile. I would throw these barrels down filled with this, and I would see that sometimes after 6 weeks, it would just come out tasting kind of vanilla, like from the oak, with very little salt content. Sometimes there would be a little bit too much. I learned that if there was any sort of air gap in there, any bubble in there, seawater would fill. It would just come in there. It would find a way in there, and that would negatively impact the quality of the rum. So it had to be, not only did the barrel have to be completely swelled, but the contents needed to be completely filled too. It needed to spill over the top when it was closed up, so that there wouldn't be any penetration from the seawater in any direct way or through any other method. Because seawater is one of the toughest things out there, right? One of the most corrosive and forceful elements that we've experienced. So yeah, iterative testing, definitely lost a few barrels, both to mystery, and also some of them exploded on us because they were down too long and the wood staves essentially rotted. We pulled up one time and it had gone like this in the bag, and we were thinking, wow, did it swell that much? Or we couldn't get it out of there. We had to really pry it, and then we saw what happened. The front part of the barrel had swollen completely and come off as its own disc, and the rest of the thing just bloomed, and it was all gone, sadly.
Yeah. So I want to press more on the sort of like evolving from divers to suddenly like master blenders and warehouse managers of the sea at some point. But I also want to give our listeners a clear image of what you're doing with these barrels. So from what I've gathered on your blog, it seems like you've experimented with a number of different barrel sizes. Obviously, most of these are small-ish format. So I'd love to hear you talk about like precisely what barrel sizes you're using and roughly how big those are. Like if someone was like holding them and trying, like literally diving down to the bottom of the ocean with them, and then also the bagging process, because that seems to be like one of the interesting control measures that you have. So if you could just describe the bagging and the barrels themselves and what it looks like to get them down and maybe even how you secure them.
So this is a 3-liter barrel for size. It's fairly, I would say, easier to get down than some of our larger barrels, which we have one off to the side is a large 2-gallon barrel. I can't speak to how difficult or easy it is to submerge such a thing, but you can see a big size difference. Eddie needs to bring these under. So thank you, Eddie. It's not easy. Definitely the 2-gallon is you've got to swim down there with it and hook it up, and
You have to weight yourself.
Yeah. So we've done a 3-liter, 2 gallons, and then a smaller 1-gallon barrel for smaller projects.
Some 1 liters as well.
Yeah. So the bagging process is, if I can say something that we're going to slowly venture away from. It was good at the beginning. Everything came out very nicely. But we're working on a new system to have the barrels free flowing and have them in constant contact with fresh water as it moves. So the reason for putting them in the bag initially was to keep them as secure as possible, was to keep them in the same place, not lose them. And it worked. It worked very well, and it still works. But I think we're going to venture away from that slowly as we progress in these experiments and in these endeavors, as we're learning new things every time we get out there. We've been very lucky. I mean, we've only lost a couple of them, and that was maybe because we put something in there that was maybe too sweet, and it reacted with something in there, and it caused it to pop. Other than that, our experiments have been quite successful, actually.
Let's talk about flavor, because Nick, you mentioned the transformation of this initial agricole style rum into something that was much more chocolatey and salted caramel. Obviously this is like one of the exciting things that you guys are chasing, and obviously that's part of the excitement of bringing these barrels up and popping the barrel, is to see exactly what happened and to try and plot that against what's happened previously. I completely relate to that kind of excitement. What are some of those flavor transformations that you are finding in a reliable way, and what are some of perhaps the more curious things that you've tasted as you've run these experiments?
You want to talk about the sunken Seagroni?
Yeah, so salinity comes into play on the nose, on the olfactory. You can smell it from the glass. You smell the ocean. It's quite amazing, which you don't get from adding the saline solution. You don't get that smell of the deep blue. It doesn't come up.
Which is why we serve the Seagroni no garnish.
Yeah.
It's not diluted by shaking, poured over large ice.
Yeah. Mouthfeel, texture is silky. It's smooth. It becomes somewhat viscous, as if you fat washed or clarified a cocktail. It has a very buttery and smooth texture to it.
Silky, I would say. Like
Silky,
probably
yeah.
silky is the. I like the it's like you can almost chew it.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Very, very smooth. Um, and there's the weird thing that happens that we've been trying to chase since that first one is that dark sea salt chocolate. It's like a 70-80% dark sea salt um, chocolate. It's very, very good. If you're a fan of chocolate, I think I think you've got to be. Um, what else?
The recent one that
It's kind
we
of spicy.
It was kind of spicy.
yeah, and we saw so in the recent batch that we did I mean like a kind of batch of barrels. So
Excuse me.
we created a 3 barrels full of the same blend, right? We created this Seagroni and went down in 3 different barrels. It was 9 liters total. And we noticed when we were coming up, and we test everything in the lab once it comes up and filtered and everything, and that each barrel had imparted its own specific flavor profile to all of those. And so the second barrel that we had, that was a third fill.
That was a third fill, I believe, and it had what we call the sea Thai blend, which is a Mai Tai blend, so Jamaican and an agricole rum from Martinique, and
Just the rums.
just the rums. We tried with the curacao once, and that's how we lost a barrel. The how many fills and what was filled in there previously makes a huge difference, and obviously as you know, you have cask finish spirits, and you know, in the world of spirits, and it makes a huge difference. Those things come out in a very nice way, and that second one out of the 3 was slightly spiced in a very peculiar way. It wasn't and there was nothing spiced in there. There wasn't a spiced rum. There wasn't anything of that nature. But it was very interesting to get a nice little tingle on the back as it went down, but still smooth, still buttery, still silky. Yeah, and each barrel was different, as they always are, but they were in the same place for the same amount of time, and they all experienced very similar things on that final drop. But their previous fills made a huge impact on their profile.
Yeah, two of those barrels had actually been made at the same time, and had been employed in our use with the same contents for the first fills.
Yeah.
I just love listening to you guys talk like this, because I, as a spirits judge, I'm often in the room with master blenders and people who are actively managing barrels in warehouses, or people who run, for example, independent bottling projects where they're sourcing spirits from other places and trying to blend them into either something consistent or something interesting. And so like a lot of the things that you're saying here are mirroring what these folks would say, except they're doing it on dry land. So it's pretty interesting. I'm curious, we've been speaking up to this point about what's happening sort of behind closed doors at the lab and sort of like the background behind this project. But you guys have gotten a lot of liquid to lips. You've got an actual bar where you're serving this stuff. You were just up at Bar Convent Brooklyn, presumably doing some Seagroni related activations. So can you just talk a little bit about how people are experiencing this? I mean, like a silky, fat washed feeling rum Negroni that smells like the ocean is probably not something that a lot of people are used to. So what's the feedback?
I mean, the initial reaction from everyone is, "Oh wow." Yeah.
Well, I can on my side, I can tell you that some people don't get it, but when you start to explain, because we want to explain, when you try to explain, they say, "Really? Age in the ocean?" Yeah, I can show you the video. I always have video on my phone right there. So I say, "Yes, this is Eddie. This is Billy." And also when we do presentation. So that's what happened last week in BCB and Sunken Harbor. The week before up in the Ukilau. So we did present the Seagroni, and then we presented the Mai Kai. We had a special edition for the Mai Kai as well. and we're gonna keep doing that. Example, this kind of like liquid tulips moment in this particular bar or event, people they stay hours to listen to you, and eventually they will order a barrel. That's what actually has actually happened right now. But Eddie can tell you and Nick that when they went to do a different event for like regular public was actually difficult to get people listen to you because it's a different event. So you go there and then you just drink it whatever. Thank you. Oh, good. Oh, under the ocean. Oh, okay, thank you very much. Come on. It was a lot of work there. Then we did it for Cafe La Trova as well. It was actually something special. It was not Seagroni, it was a Presidente, but was the top selling on that night. Me and Billy went to do the pop up with the Kaona and then Reef Rum Supply. Last year, same thing. I did a 2 days pop ups, completely sold out at the 3 Nadash in Chicago. Presented. We have a Seagroni, one of the 3 cocktails as well. 4 cocktails, I remember I did, and it was a prepaid ticket with slot. So I served 140 Seagroni in 2 days, and then I each one of them they listen to the story. That guy was some table were 3 people, so otherwise was it's amazing. And then people really say wow. Then when you show the video and then you share the podcast, I'm sorry, the blog and everything, an amazing job, especially Nick is doing that. It's great. It's great. So this. People ask how we do this, if we work with other spirits, work with other drinks. So, and that's what actually Billy is preparing soon.
Yeah. And actually, so when we were at Bar Convent and presented at Sunken Harbor, there was a reaction that I wasn't expecting. One was like from our side, which was that we got our product up there safely, and everything tasted as
good job.
It met our expectations. So we were very lucky, as we were prepared, as we are now more of a veteran status and doing this process. I feel like we've got this down, right? But when people were tasting the various Seagronis, they had a completely unaged one that was made on the spot, which was not a Seagroni, but it was a rum Negroni, to taste against a barreled rum Negroni, to taste against the sea Negroni. But in between the 2 land aged or the terrestrial Seagronis, which were not underwater, rum Negronis, sorry. There were 2 spirits that we had put down that we had them try. One of them was the sea Thai, and the other one was what we call sea Ray, which is one of my initial experiments that has kind of gone on since, which is to put Ray and Nephew overproof in a barrel underwater for a month. And that's always been special and near and dear to us at the bar and as friends. And people are always excited to try that. Like it dacks up really nicely. But when they tried that, I'm kind of getting chills thinking about it right now. The reaction in the room was just, it was palpable. They were kind of blown away by it. And I was thinking that the Seagroni was going to be, the crowning achievement, but it was the Sea Ray that did it. And people, almost everybody in the audience had probably had Ray and Nephew before and knew what it should taste like. And it was so different because it had proofed down a little bit. It had aged a little bit. It had those nice tannins and oak flavors that give it that vanilla note. And it had some salinity on it.
So I'm the kind of person who thinks that flavor happens in the brain and that no matter what you run under a GCMS report and compare peaks and valleys, like ultimately that's not where the buck stops. But I would be fascinated to run a regular Ray and Nephew overproof against your Sea Ray, because I feel like that would present a really nice snapshot of precisely some of the things that are going on when you're putting just a spirit and not a sweetened and, slightly proof down, Seagroni down underwater. So that's something I would be totally interested in seeing. I actually know someone, so maybe we can talk offline. I know somebody who could run those samples for you, and I would float it. I'd be happy to float it just to see what happens. So we can maybe talk about making that happen. I love that you brought up the reaction in the room with the bartenders, because I think this kind of surprise and, like, I guess oh my God, there is something new that we can achieve in the cocktail world is something that is not really on most people's minds right now. Most people's minds are, to me, on, like, God, how expensive have cocktails gotten? And oh my God, how can we batch more things? And how can we stay open as bars post COVID? And to me, this is just such a breath of fresh air, because you're actually treading some new ground and doing interesting things. So, how do you think about balancing that side of it, the creative surprise, delight, art, and maritime adventure side of things, with the, all right, how do we sell this stuff? How do we price it so that people are actually willing to buy a ticket or buy a barrel, right? How do you balance the economics of this with the art?
Well, I think you hit on kind of the core consideration there, which is differentiation within a saturated landscape, particularly in a declining market, right? And we see hospitality concepts really, going above and beyond to differentiate themselves, to create new and memorable experiences. And we also see a lot of kind of generational departure from the spirits world in general, right? That we certainly missed the cutoff for that. We're underwater with a barrel in our arms, But I think where we've been able to partner with some really dedicated restaurant owners, bar owners, and establish what ticket pricing and volume of cocktails and cocktail price, what that looks like for their particular market, particularly Miami versus New York versus Chicago, different place to seat those really well for their own customer base. I think that the things that are done for profit first always feel like they're done for profit first. There have been some interesting things that have kind of come out of that approach. I think like a lot of the barrel selects that are really popular kind of globally, particularly in the rum world, bring forward a lot of that focus and thinking and learning that master blenders bring to their craft and make that accessible to the public. And I think that's exactly kind of the place where our project we found kind of intersects with the broader market, is that we are chasing our own palettes this way. We're chasing our own adventure this way in what we're exploring, what we're continuing to create. So how do we commercialize? We leverage our network,
and it really does seem like you're inhabiting this really interesting and potentially frustrating middle scale, right? Because you're now at this point where you've been doing this for a while. You know how to do it really well. You're now minimizing your losses, right? So you're, in principle, your cost of goods is going down, your loss rate's going down. And you've got interest from some of these larger venues that are doing the specialized, tiki and tropical projects at cities around the country. But it's still a very expensive thing to do. So it seems like when you have the opportunity, you can sort of flex the scale up and kind of do like a bigger drop and, know reliably that you've got a dedicated project that drop is going to get sold to. But on the other hand, like, I am kind of happy that also you get to maintain, you're in that middle space, but you get to maintain connection with the art side of it, which is something that I personally really appreciate, because it does, it does feel a little sad sometimes when you've connected with something and you've seen something at the early phases of its development and you really fell in love with it at that phase, and then you see it just sort of streak off with investment, and then it's so far down the road that you've lost touch with it. So personally, from the imagination of a really passionate consumer, I appreciate that about the project.
And that very much is the first question we ask ourselves at every opportunity is can we do this the right way? Can we meet the scale? Can we meet the timeline? Is this an event that we can present the cocktail, the spirit, the way that it needs to be presented to the people? Yeah.
We've had to turn down events because the timeline was just too close, and we weren't going to be able to produce a result that was going to be satisfactory to ourselves, which we thought would be unsatisfactory to people who were trying it for the first time.
So what are some of the aspects of this project that we haven't covered yet? I feel like we've done a pretty good job talking about the process, some of the consequences of underwater barrel aging, some of the differences between agitation down at the bottom of the ocean under pressure versus Kentucky rickhouse. Before we move on to kind of like the wrap up phase of this, what are some of the things that maybe don't get talked about enough with this project that you think people should know, or anything that I've egregiously overlooked?
Well, I think one other aspect, one other dimension to this that we've discovered is that we're also cellaring down there, because temperature stays pretty constant for the period that it's down there. It might vary by a degree or two, but we're in a thermocline that sees gradual change over the period of a year. So we have a colder season and we have a warmer season, and it's Florida, so it's not getting colder than about 71 degrees in January, February, and in the summer we're approaching the 90s, the low 90s. So that's one aspect of it, and I have noticed an appreciable difference in I don't want to say the flavor, but the mouthfeel after it's been out there in the winter months versus the summer months. We still get this density, this meld that happens, melding of the ingredients that's really nice, and I think brings about this chew that Danny was talking about when you sip it, that gives it this body. And I think that it's a little bit better during the winter months. It's still there during the summer months when we pull a barrel that's been in during that time, but it's particularly nice then. I don't know if it's because the density of the water is greater because of the temperature at that time, in addition to the pressure, or what the exact science is that goes on behind that. But that's something that we're thinking about.
It's a little strange to think about underwater as being like some sort of native environment for a barrel, right? So we can imagine a barrel here on land, like in a Kentucky rickhouse, and we can envision, a hot summer day, and the warehouse manager is moving barrels around and sweating because their body is subject to the same conditions as that barrel, the same heat and humidity as that barrel's experiencing. But it's a little bit of a mind bend to picture you, Eddie, going down there and being subjected to the same two atmospheres of pressure and the same currents and the same water, like the chemical composition of the water that these barrels are subject to. So like what seems on the surface to be almost a complete apples and orange comparison is actually like, no, you're the perfect person to do this, because you're bringing it down there and your body is like down in the aquatic warehouse, down in the aquatic cellar, right alongside that barrel. So like, I don't know, what does that feel like? Can you describe that to people, besides, ear popping pressurization aside? Like, what's it like to be a body down there with the barrels?
your lungs are at half. So you're taking a lung fill if you're free diving, and your lungs are at half their size when you're down at -10 meters. So you also become negatively buoyant at that point, and you begin to sink. You don't sink as fast as you do when you go a little bit deeper than that, maybe 50, 60 feet. Once you're at -20 meters, you start to sink a lot faster. But we see that the barrels are floating because alcohol is less dense, and or depending on what we put on in there, of course. So we see the barrels floating. Billy was talking about how the bigger barrels are tougher to put down there. It's principally because of buoyancy. So I have to weigh myself down a little bit more to get down there. And I'm comfortable doing that in the environment we're in because it's clear there's no reef structure around us aside from that which we are creating with our rig that we attach this to. Because everything grows on everything down there, except for the sand. And I get down there, and everything kind of gets. You get this hug. You're feeling hugged by the ocean, and when you're at the very bottom and you're looking around, and there's nothing else over there. You're in this chamber. It's kind of this beautiful chamber. You've got a roof above you where the air is. And it gives you this beautiful, ever-changing view of the sky, and there's just, depending on the visibility that day, this chamber that you're in, and it feels very comfortable. Honestly, once you get past, if you've trained to do this, to do breath holds, whether it's for apnea diving or spearfishing. It becomes second nature. And there's some good days and bad days. There's some days when you're like, wow, I need to get up immediately. Like this is painful. I've been down for too long. And it turns out you were only down for like 28 seconds. And then there's some days when you're pushing a minute and it feels really easy. And that's also something to be careful with too as a diver, because you don't want to become too complacent down there when you're depriving yourself of oxygen and CO2 starts to build up. But we're very careful about that. Most of our drops are about 30 seconds, between 30 seconds and 1 minute. So it's quick round trip. And we try to go out on days where the visibility and the conditions are good so that we don't have to deal with looking around for the barrels and finding our spot or staying on top of it.
There's the orange in the apples to oranges comparison, right? Because the rickhouse managers in Kentucky don't have to worry about only having 30 seconds to manipulate their inventory. So we did get there eventually, but man, I just love the way you talk about being hugged by the ocean, having this sort of chamber around you. I mean, this is to me probably the best sort of infomercial spot for your blog, because I mentioned, as we prep for this, that I think blogging is a lost art form, right? Because everything is just AI generated writing these days. And so, one thing that got me probably most excited for this conversation is actually visiting your blog, reading through the drop journals and the different entries that you put there, and you really give people a sense of sort of the extended conceptual terroir, right? You describe, seeing a rare sort of endangered sawfish swimming by one day, right? And that's part of the, as tiki and tropical drink folks, you understand the role that atmosphere plays in the enjoyment of this. So I really encourage our listeners to go and check out your blog and read through some of the experiences. But as we move towards wrap up here, I've got sort of like a two-headed question, right? The obvious one is, what's next for the Seagroni, for your team and the Seagroni, and the other one is, I know people are going to get excited about this because I'm going to use this podcast as part of a presentation I'm doing on underwater aging at the Rum Summit in Miami in August. People are going to listen to this on the podcast, and they're immediately going to start thinking about how they can start sticking barrels underwater. So what's next for you guys? And maybe as a little parting gift, do you have any advice for folks who might be tempted to try their hands at this on their own?
Yeah, the direction that we've been pushing in, is really like what you see on the blog is pretty much what our day-to-day life looks like. And that kind of goes back to where all this started, is Sunday road trips and, trying to hit the tub and every other little tiki dive bar we can in South Florida and get on the water as much as possible. Where we've been living right now is, partnering with those people that are closest to us, that we, friends at home, Cafe La Trova, helping them celebrate anniversary, things like that, as well as some private barrelings. And really where the push is to be conservative about scale and to introduce this the right way. Again, making sure that everything that we present is the best possible thing that we've done to date. And so pursuing brand partnerships like we've done with, successfully with a few spirits so far, as well as bars and restaurants, and really kind of focusing our efforts on showing up in person, showing up with, event specific creative cocktails or spirits, aging them both for a specific audience, and whether that's industry events, events hosted by bars, by restaurants. It allows us to work iteratively. We've stacked up several events into some pretty heavy drops where the barrels buoyancy overpowered the weight of our anchors and they almost walked off.
You can read about that on the blog.
So that's the short answer is find us where great cocktails are served. Events like we have a couple coming up in the next few months that we'll post about.
Fantastic.
Yeah, I think like-minded, adventurous people tend to gravitate toward this, and it's been a really fun experience to meet new people and see what possibilities lie out there. I don't know if I can tell you there's a specific direction that this is going to go in right now, but I'd love to see this on a bar program for some adventurous bar that is willing to take us on as an item on their menu. I would love to see this expand to maybe a spirits brand that is interested in using this practice, exploring this practice with their production.
And if you want to do it at home, soak your barrels ahead of time, fill them all the way up,
Fill them to the brim,
Mm-hmm.
and hold your breath.
Have a good spot and don't tell anybody where it is.
Remember where you put them.
Yeah, remember where you put them. So actually this is one functional question is do you soak with fresh water and then fill in the lab and then bring out to salt?
Yes.
Yep.
Excellent. Yeah, that would seem to be the thing that really controls how much salt water actually gets in there. So you're probably, I would imagine you're out on the boat with the thing actively, like you're soaked, you fill, and then do you keep it wet and like hydrated as you're bringing it out to the drop spot?
No, that doesn't seem to be too necessary. We just make sure that they're watertight to begin with and fill them, and then bring them out within 24 hours. That's the goal. And we usually kayak it out there. Now we have access to a boat, so that makes it a little more comfortable and easier. A little more expensive with gas, of course, but
right.
And there's still an adventure there.
Yeah. Well, that's great advice, especially the remember where you put it advice, and make sure it doesn't walk off. So with that, if you guys don't mind, we'll hit the lightning round really quick.
All right,
Let's do it.
All right.